Hello, salut. My name is Sarah, and I'm coming to you from Durham, Ontario, which is Mississauga First Nation traditional territory. Welcome to No New Nuclear Part 4, where we'll be talking mostly about SNC-Lavalin. So, SNC-Lavalin had been bribing Libyan government officials for about 10 years, and that's not okay. And if they were convicted, that it kind of got uncovered in 2019. They would have been blocked from competing on any federal government contracts for 10 years. So this all came to light during just before the last election in 2019. So what else was happening in 2011 after SNC-Lavalin had been bribing Libyan government officials for 10 years? What else was going on in 2011? Atomic Energy of Canada Limited was broken up by the Harper government, and it was sold to SNC-Lavalin. And it's difficult to know exactly what was sold to SNC-Lavalin for $15 million. So Atomic Energy of Canada Limited was the Crown Corporation for all of Canada's nuclear everything from World War II onwards. That's where the CANDU reactors were developed. And so in 2011, they changed the name to CANDU Energy, and that's what SNC-Lavalin bought. Basically all the designs. Yeah, or they now own those designs. Of all the commercial reactors, the CANDU design produces the most plutonium per unit of energy and is the most difficult to safeguard. That is a quote from a man named David Martin, and CCNR.org, Canadian Coalition for Nuclear Responsibility, is a really great website. Why is that important? Plutonium, let's not forget, is the first man-made element in the periodic table. It does not occur in nature. And it's what you need to make nuclear bombs. So why did Canada sell off this important part of Atomic Energy of Canada Limited? Because they wanted to try to make some money off of it with a new generation. Remember, we're still in 2011 here. And so SNC-Lavalin paid $15 million, and then that same year they got $75 million, and they were trying to target. We're not entirely sure what target means, but let's not forget that they had been busy bribing officials in other countries. And these are the countries that they were going to target for trying to sell this new type of reactor: Ontario, Jordan, Romania, Argentina, Turkey, and China. So some of the locations of interest where there's fuel waste and experimental reactors and designs are at Pinawa, which is in Manitoba, just on the other side of the border with Ontario, and Chalk River Labs, kind of at the headwaters of the Ottawa River. So when they tried to sell their fancy new design to Ontario, Ontario said, no, I think we'll wait. We're not really sure what's going on with this yet. And good for them at the time, Ontario. And maybe it's because, Pinawa and Chalk River look like this. They look like something from a science fiction movie from 1963. They're old. So going forward in time, SNC-Lavalin got into a little bit of trouble with some corruption charges in Bangladesh. The World Bank said that SNC-Lavalin and none of its subsidiaries would be able to bid on any contracts within the World Bank, so like around the world, for 10 years. So we've got Bangladesh, we've got Cambodia, we've got Libya. And then if you want to dig into that little gray box underneath, we've got some Canadian election fraud. But I'm going to continue to focus on SNC-Lavalin's involvement with Canada's nuclear projects. So now we're in 2015. And having that little piece of AECL wasn't enough. So they got together and they made a consortium. Basically, it's just like a funding shell, a business shell called Canadian Nuclear Energy Alliance, and they got control of CNL, Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, which is where the scientists live. It was a subsidiary of what was left of the Crown, and now it is controlled by SNC-Lavalin, and their partners at the time were CH2M, Fluor, which is a known weapons producer, Energy Solutions, and Rolls-Royce. Energy Solutions is out. CH2M was bought by Jacobs, which is a known weapons producer, and Rolls-Royce is out, but they are all over new nuclear. You see them lots. So what did they get when they got at CNL? So it's the final steps of that restructuring that started in 2011, when they got the rights to the CANDU nuclear technology, and now they're in charge of CNL. And so even in 2015, things have changed a little bit. Jordan is out. Turkey is out, but the United Kingdom is maybe interested. This is from Atomic Energy of Canada's, remember, the Crown Corporation, which basically doesn't really exist anymore, as far as I can tell. We've established that that SNC-Lavalin bought the design, the CANDU design, in 2011, and that they bought controlling ability over CNL. But AECL, the Crown Corporation, on their website, they're saying that they're in charge still. So I find that this is a little difficult to understand. And then you go to Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, and so they're mentioning the Crown Corporation here, which is kind of code speak for SNC-Lavalin. And they do mention the GOCO model. That's the first time that's mentioned, is on the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories website. That means government-owned, company-operated. It's sketchy at best. It's not well defined anywhere that I can find. And I think that the people who are operating within this GOCO model, all of these different players, I think they themselves don't understand what the GOCO model means. And so here we get, again, the Canadian National Energy Alliance, which is SNC-Lavalin, has controlling shares of that, is clearly in charge. That's what that says. So it's funny that all of these different labels are used, but SNC-Lavalin isn't used once. It's not used here, it's not used here, and it feels like maybe they're trying to hide something. So on SNC-Lavalin's website, they're quite proud. They're not trying to hide anything. And here we have their new partners. And so this is where things get a little confusing. Is everybody's using different language to say what the job is of the Canadian National Energy. They're going to operate Canada's nuclear research and development labs. They have responsibility for the decommissioning and the radio waste management, radioactive waste management. And then it talks about the different locations. There's 10 locations. They don't list them for us, unfortunately. On the Fluor website, they say that the Canadian National Energy Alliance is a Fluor consortium. So are they having an argument about who's actually in charge? And again, slightly different language. It was formed to respond to the Government of Canada's procurement of these assets. And their contract focuses on 3 things: addressing radioactive waste and decommissioning responsibilities, delivering nuclear science and technology that supports the Government of Canada and industry, and revitalizing the chalk labs. So we've got the waste issue. We've got something about supporting the industry. And then Chalk River Labs is supposed to get a fancy new lab. But the real question is, what's going on with the designs, and the old designs, the experimental designs from Pinawa and Chalk River, the new designs that have been happening with CNL. Who's in charge of that? And it's these shady corporations, and these known weapons producers have access to that. And apparently they're supposed to be making money with that. So Fluor is at least very open about listing the different sites. I have my podcast talks about Chalk River. I've got a podcast about Port Hope. I'd hope to get a podcast about each of these sites. So then they were audited in 2017, and we've got a fairly clear description of what the job is to take care of the waste, and that's the real problem. That's the crux of the problem in Canada, is that nuclear waste is ridiculously expensive. It's just that's moderate. It's at least double. It's a crazy. We have to take care of it for millions of years, and we still have no idea what to do with it. And then this again is different in order to sustain and develop Canada's capabilities in the private sector. What does that mean? What are they selling? What are they selling? So during that audit, they found that the corporation, whether it's Atomic Energy of Canada Limited or SNC-Lavalin, Canadian National Energy Alliance, that corporation, at least since 2015, had been operating without a president or a chief executive officer. It had fired everyone, so the buildings were empty. Only 40 people left working there, probably terrified for their jobs, and are certainly not going to speak up if something strange is happening. And before it became Canadian National Energy Alliance, when it was still the Crown Corporation, it hadn't been holding public meetings. So there's absolutely no public oversight. So if you can think of the materials at Pinawa and Chalk River and those other locations, experimental locations, and all the designs as the chickens, and SNC-Lavalin as the fox, this picture comes to mind. So 2018, SNC-Lavalin, if you remember at the beginning, SNC-Lavalin knew that it was going to be investigated about the corruption charges with Libya, with bribing government officials in Libya. And at this point, nobody can afford for SNC-Lavalin to not be able to bid for a whole 10 years on any government contracts. So they lobby Justin Trudeau's government to create this thing, deferred prosecution agreement. So instead of not being able to bid on any government contracts for 10 years, instead they just pay a fine. It's basically a get out of jail free card. And Justin Trudeau's government made that thing called deferred prosecution agreements. And Jody Raybould-Wilson at the time, who was the Auditor General, said, no, I'm not going to go with deferred prosecution agreement. I'm going to investigate SNC-Lavalin and what they did in Libya. And for that, she was very deeply pressured by the Prime Minister's office, which is not okay. The Attorney General's office is one of the most important institutions in our country investigating fraud by the government. And so it was wrong of him to pressure her to forget about it and give it up. And so he was investigated by the Ethics Commissioner, and this is what the Ethics Commissioner said. The authority of the Prime Minister and his office was used to circumvent, undermine, and ultimately attempt to discredit the decision of the Director of Public Prosecutions, as well as the authority of Wilson Raybould. That's Jody Wilson Raybould, who was the Attorney General. Trudeau contravened Section 9 of the Conflict of Interest Act through a series of flagrant attempts to influence Wilson Raybould to reach an agreement with SNC-Lavalin to avoid criminal prosecution, meaning our Prime Minister broke the law, and he was about to be investigated by the RCMP. Maybe he was, I'm not entirely sure. And then we had an election, and I don't know what happened after that. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I guess he just got away scot-free. So now what we need to just recap is that SNC-Lavalin decides on what happens with the nuclear waste through its contractor, Canadian Nuclear Labs. And that nuclear waste contains plutonium, which makes nuclear bombs. And right now, some of it is in liquid form, I think, at some of those experimental locations. But with the big three, Bruce Nuclear Power Generating Station on Lake Huron, and Pickering and Darlington Nuclear Power Generating Stations on Lake Ontario, that CANDU waste is always in solid form. And also the one out at Point Lepreau in New Brunswick, it's solid. And so the plan right now for a long time has been to put it deep underground, and they've narrowed it down to 2 locations. One is in Teeswater, Ontario, near the Bruce generating plant, and one is way up north in a place called Ignace. And this is where the big scary if comes in. Some of these new small modular reactors are saying they're going to recycle it, which is a big lie. What they want to do is turn the solid waste into a liquid form, which creates all new types of waste, for which there is no plan. And it's very dangerous. And they want to extract a small percentage of the solid waste does have plutonium in it. And that creates a serious weapons proliferation risk around the planet. Because, of course, the idea is to sell these small modular reactors around the planet. And whichever country gets them, whether it's Jordan or Turkey or China or Argentina or whoever gets those small modular reactors that can take out plutonium will have easy access to plutonium. And to learn about one company that's already received 50.5 million, you can see my first YouTube video. And another one that got some money was Terrestrial Energy, based out of Oakville, Ontario. They got 20 million last year, just in the fall. And who's on the board of advisors is Stephen Harper, who got this all started back in 2011. So if you don't think that needs to be investigated, then I don't know what does deserve to be investigated in this country. You can learn about some of those communities and their waste issues on my podcast Radioactive. And if you share this video, please use the hashtag StopSMRs and hashtag No New Nuclear. Thank you.